Hello everyone, welcome back, and if you're new to the channel, welcome to you too. Hello, my name is Steve, and you know what? I'm a little sad today because this might be the very last build style episode I ever do on the 25 Quattro Audi S4. If you've been following along since about October, you'll know that I've been on the path to sell this car in the spring, and I started that with taking out the engine to do an entire timing service, but of course, me being me, while I was in there, I did a whole bunch of other stuff. You can go back and check out the recent playlist right here to see what I've been up to. But now we're on the final paces here, so we are going to be doing one last modification in the engine, a couple things on the exterior of the car, finally going to get to some interior things that I've been meaning to do for like literally 3 years now, and just doing that final last bit of kind of buttoning up in presentation so it's just perfect for sale. And super fast reminder, if you ever see me using a tool or a consumable good or an actual part, just know that the information is always in the description of the video. I try my best to make sure there's a link to Amazon or wherever the source might be, or if it's an Audi part, like the actual part numbers included, it's all there. Take a look. Look how good she is looking. And I really must say, I've enjoyed working on this platform over time. I think I've made the engine bay here look like a real piece of art. We're actually going to make one more improvement pretty soon up on the intake system here. That's the engine mod I was talking about. But I also just wanted to address why it's on wheel dollies right now. That is so I can get out of the garage. The new project is actually just outside blocking the S4 in. So to get in and out, I actually have to like push the car over, drive it out, bring it back in, and then put it back on the dolly to push it back over every single time. It's a short-term problem, but you know, it is what it is. Before we dive into what I'm changing, let me just give you a rundown on what my intake setup is right now, because I would say it is rather unique and kind of refined for an NA build. I have the Tweetler 90mm throttle body with their custom 3D printed adapter that goes into the plate behind it. And then I have the 034 Motorsport silicone hose that is roughly 3.5 inches ID on there. I'm running the stock mass airflow sensor body. And then everything past that point is the Jackal Motorsports cold air intake kit. The video that's popping up on the top right of your screen right now is the video where I went ahead and actually did the auxiliary radiator delete. That gave me some room to create a duct that takes air from this entire scoop right here and feed it up under the intake. You can see the vent down right there. It's nothing pretty, but it definitely gets the job done. And then since then, I've actually also modified the intake setup just a little bit, because you'll see in previous videos, this filter is actually clocked kind of downwards at a 45-degree angle, but you can tell that it is not right now. It's kind of pointed out nice and level to the fender. So to be 1000% clear, Jackal kit, the aluminum pipe that's in between these two silicone pieces, Jackal kit. I've already modified this part right here. You would have normally gotten a straight coupler. This is a 45. This is where we're going to pick up things. As you know, when it comes to a naturally aspirated engine, basically it's as simple as more air and more fuel equals more power. There's really nothing else that you can play with there other than timing to make more power. So I want to make one more change here and do some measurements. If you go back and watch the install video where I put on the Tweetler throttle body, you'll know that I did some before and after measurements on the mass airflow sensor to see if it was actually moving more air through the intake system. And on screen are the results. And they're actually not that different, which kind of surprised me at the time, but I ran out of time to continue figuring out why that was the case and to try something else. Looking back at our straw, as I called it in the last video, let's look at where our remaining skinny points are. I do have an unsolvable problem right now because I'm not going to do it. Not that it couldn't be done by someone else, but the intake manifold itself is not ported, right? So if we look at our restrictions all the way down into the intake valves, the very first one is going to be the ports themselves, especially the back two. Those are the ones that are modified the most. Just so you know, when you get a ported intake manifold, they're not all ported equally. They're all a little bit different actually. And then likewise in the little part right here, the elbow, that gets ported as well. Because technically right now, yeah, it's great that this is 90mm and technically the inside of this pipe is too, but it immediately necks down as of this point. So granted, we're gonna have to move on upstream. Looking at the intake design again, I feel like the opportunities for improvement are pretty obvious, and I'm very surprised none of you called me out on the MAF body. Now, real quick, the throttle body here, 90mm being the internal diameter. I just wanted to call that out because the silicone piping is 3.5 inches internal diameter, and those roughly equate to the exact same thing. My goal, I should state, is a full 3.5 inner diameter inch track all the way from filter to throttle body. But like I said, with the stock MAF body right here, it's roughly 3.25 inner diameter, which doesn't seem like a big difference, but it is clearly the neck down. There is a bit of a technicality to changing this. I'll talk about that in a second. I'm going to start with this end of the system here and try to do some more scientific testing. I would like to see if we can speed up the air to get more airflow before we remove restrictions. But how the heck do you do that? How do you make air move faster and not change pipe diameter? Well, you do it with one of these. This is a bellmouth velocity stack. So let me take off the current filter and the aluminum piping joining it into the silicone body, and you'll see exactly how this is going to work. So here's the thing. Once upon a time, I was going to make an entire episode dedicated to these intake changes and go on at length about how velocity stacks work in terms of the length of the pipe and the different applications and the curvature and on and on and on with the usual detail that I do. I don't have time to do that here, so I'm going to give you a really short version of it, but I do absolutely encourage you to Google it because it's actually a really interesting topic, and I guarantee you it's going to change the way that you look at your intake system. Also, this is the stock air box for the S4. Look what's already in here. It is a velocity stack, not a bellmouth, but it's certainly a trumpet, so manufacturers know that your engine needs a little extra help sucking that air through the filter and getting air moving quickly into the rest of the intake. Here's sort of an overly dramatic comparison between having a velocity stack, specifically a bellmouth one, versus not. So the bellmouth is designed to draw air from essentially every direction possible, smoothly and seamlessly into the center. So we're talking about the 90-degree range from the side, even behind it, down and in. When you do not have this curvature to allow air to slipstream in, it tends to pinch on the inside. So it's trying to go over a tight corner, and it actually circulates in little tight areas right on the outside, which causes turbulence and having the air in the middle not even go in smoothly itself. And that's not to say that filters themselves don't try to account for this, because they do. You can see it plainly. There is a curvature right here, and if I put my hand in, although I'm not going to show you with the camera, I can confirm that there is a smoothing of the outside here, so that when the filter is sucking in air as high as it possibly can, high RPM, the air is trying to get smoothly into the middle of the tract. But it's also plain to see that there is a pretty big difference between that little radius right there and something like this. I also need to be 100% fair with this comparison in the sense that the aluminum pipe that you get with the Jackal cold air intake kit is the proper 3¼ inches inner diameter, which is the same as the MAF body, so that's good, that's OE, and this pipe here is 3½ inches on the inside. But also, when you use one of these, well, you have a bit of a problem because this filter hole is made for a normal pipe diameter. This does not work, which is why you have to get a corresponding filter. So this thing is monstrous. This is a full 6 inches, I believe, on the inside. It is designed specifically to go around the mouth of the velocity stack. So my end result here should be a little bit more surface area for air to come into the intake. We have the smoothing effect of the bellmouth, and we have a little bit bigger of a diameter on the bottom too. But with this bigger filter, and why ultimately I wanted to change this, is that becomes impossible. Like, that does not fit there. It does fit sideways though. So I got myself a 45-degree fitting here. Again, this is the full 3½ inch inner diameter, and I did a little trimming on the top and the bottom to achieve the redirected angle that you see here. This is where I have to say, full disclosure, try not to introduce any bends if possible before the MAF sensor in your system, because it kind of bunches up air on the outside of the bend, as you would imagine it would, which means the readings are not necessarily consistent at the center where the actual sensor is. So you want to avoid that as much as possible. Boom. How do you like them apples? Man, this looks so badass. It's like a big elephant trunk or something like that. So that's going to be our first change. Time to measure it. Again, I'm trying to speed run this video a little bit, so forgive me. It's not going to be a perfect comparison. I should have gone out first with the old filter setup on there and done my grams per second reading on the MAF first, and then changed this and gone out again. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to baseline it off my previous best. Let's go. You're only getting cell phone video camera on this one. Log is ready to start. We're just going to be running it on RPM, the MAF sensor, and just out of interest, the intake air temperature too. It did work. I'll show you the numbers in a moment, but I did 2 pulls back to back. The second one was where I got my personal best, and I'm kind of curious to know what would have happened if I just kept going. Context there being, this was only the maybe 3rd time I've driven the car on the road. First time all the way up to redline since doing the timing change. And I'm roughly aware that the car might be relearning some of the adaptation values, for example, like the cam adjusters on the back of the heads. So I'm a little curious to know if maybe potentially the performance is in flux right now and it's still needing to like settle into the new mechanics that are there. So maybe take this information with a grain of salt, but Here it is. On the second run, I peaked out in the rev range I would have expected, around 6,500 RPM, which is what I know from the past where things max out, at 263 grams per second. That's awesome. That actually represents a 3% increase from my old personal best. That really is something to talk about. 3% I know doesn't seem like a lot, but again, we barely opened up the diameter of the pipe just at one end in front of the mass airflow sensor there, and all we did was take advantage of physics. We're just shoving that air in as fast and from every angle as possible, and it actually worked. That's a lot of extra air. And all this begs the question, what does a guy do with the MAF housing? This is obviously the restriction that's left over between filter and throttle body. Well, you turn to your friends at Performance MRP. Before I start talking about this nice little piece of engineering here, I need to get some disclaimers out of the way because you cannot just go buy any old MAF housing, throw it on your car, and think everything is going to be just fine. Chances are you're going to be introducing some problems. MAF sensor is actually pretty cool. You should Google how they work. I'm sure someone like Engineering Explained has a video on it, but for the purposes of this video, I'll just say it is a filament. It gets cooler when airflow passes over it, and it's programmed to basically say, if I get this cold, it's going to show this level of voltage drop, and I'm going to translate that to this many grams per second of airflow in the ECU. However, the calculations only work because the ECU has already been programmed to know what the diameter of the MAF housing already is. So if you make it bigger and more air is coming through, the sensor is actually going to be misreading that volume of air. However, there's a little bit of leeway here that I'm going to take advantage of and at least do some testing. We'll see where this goes because the OE MAF body is 82 millimeters. And of course, we're going up to roughly 90. That's about a 5% difference. So just enough that potentially fuel trim itself is going to be taking care of that extra air by adding more fuel into the mixture. But in all other normal circumstances, this is when you would just update your tune to make sure that your AFRs are okay. So if you have another Audi S4 and you're watching this and you're interested in this MAF body, that's cool, good for you. You probably want to reach out to Tony at Jackal Motorsports, let him know what your project is and the entire setup. He'll probably ask you to do some logs to pull some data and then return it back to him, and he can work on a custom tune to make sure that it works really well for you. Before I get into the custom specs that I've picked for mine, let's talk about the general ones. This thing is truly a piece of art. First of all, this is not a piece of pipe that's been modified. This is a CNC machined piece of billet aluminum. Very, very nice stuff. Likewise, TIG welded onto the side of this is a custom MAF sensor bung for our Audi style MAF sensors. However, Performance MRP does offer these for many other auto manufacturers too, so depending on what else you got sitting in the garage and if you want to make a custom air intake project for that, look them up, they probably have something for you. Anything that isn't billet aluminum is stainless steel, which is also a really nice touch, so I'm talking about the fasteners for the sensor. We're talking about the rivet up here for the air straightening screen, and I'll talk about that more in a second, but really nice quality all around. An important feature not to lose track of is the fact that there are undercut edges, meaning when you put silicone tubes on both sides and you try to tighten them down, you're not just depending on friction essentially to hold it all together. This little lip on the edge is going to catch the end of that tube and make sure it doesn't slip off. The entire body is 6 inches long, which is slightly longer than the OE housing, which isn't going to be a big deal at the point where you're using silicone couplers on both sides and you can customize the lengths of those. A huge benefit of having this as a custom milled piece of aluminum is that you can set whatever inner and outer diameter you want. So they do have a bunch of preset options that give you anything that you're probably going to need anyways. I've gone ahead and selected one that is exactly 3.5 inches inner diameter. A really valuable add-on that you can put is this honeycomb stainless steel air straightener. I'll show you why I need it in a second, but suffice to say that it balances out the stream of air passing into the MAF sensor. Even in general terms, I think we all know that it's good not to have too many bends in your air intake system, and I think I'm doing pretty good here. You know, I've got a 45 down here, maybe like a really mild 30 up here. Generally speaking, pretty good though. However, this little 45 does become a bit of a problem, even though I do have that bell mouth, shoving air in. It doesn't make it go around a corner nicely. It's still going to stack up in the outside bend. And that becomes a problem, right? So like, let's say air's coming in here and I have a little pocket of like more dense air right here because it's not making it around the corner evenly. That means it'll have extra air, so to say, sort of on the bottom part of my MAF body here and less so up on the top, which is bad. We're going to get a weird mix of like half accurate information in the middle of the body. We don't want that. We want it to be as evenly as possible the whole way past. So it's experimentation time. I'm not going to be updating my tune for this. I want to see if my car can naturally make some adaptations to make it function properly. So we're going to do some temporary work here. I actually don't know if I'm going to keep this installed on the car. I might end up saving it for the S8 because it'll be just as applicable over there. But I'm going to do like a loose fitting that I can reverse at any point. Let's just see how it idles, how it revs. Before we put any load on it, like let's see what the computer thinks. VCDS is running. I'll start the car in a second. We've got our bottom two lambda control. That's the short-term fuel trim. So I expect those to go a little wild and make some adjustments. And then if we run the car for a while, we should see the adaptations change. At least on idle, it would take some driving for the partial to change for the long-term adjustments. And then up in the front, I just have the new housing in place with, of course, the sensor in there too. We don't need anything in front of it for now. I cannot wait to get rid of the stupid chime. We're going to be doing that in a little bit here, but let's go ahead and start the car. This is just through the measuring block, so I'm only looking at short and long term as they are combined from both banks of sensors. We can see that there's a pretty large discrepancy because there's obviously more air coming in and the car's throwing more fuel at it. If the car can indeed handle it, what we should see in maybe a few minutes from now is that it won't need these short-term adjustments in fuel. It'll actually change the idle adaptations to go up, and we should see this come down towards like a few percent. And there she goes. So idle adjustments are up to 4.5 roughly, and we can see we're nice and we're bordering between negative and positive, which is absolutely perfect. I sat in the car and revved it up and held it around 2,000 RPM for a little while. And the partial throttle adaptations also came down from, I think, about 2% or so to essentially 0. So that's actually pretty good news. I didn't check for DTCs, but if there was a lean or rich condition, I would have got a message up on the dash that would have come from my wideband O2 sensor, so the upstream sensor, and that means that I can continue putting this together and doing a road test. 1 hour of fiddling later, I made a modified version of my existing elbow, kind of just extended it in a couple different dimensions. Look how nice this looks now. So cool. I am very, very pleased with how that just turned out. I'm going to take it around the neighborhood now just to see if the engine falters. I'm going to be watching those same fuel trim metrics and see if anything pops up on the O2 sensors. If everything goes good, I'll take it for a longer road test, but I hope I can start marking this up and make this permanent. It's 2 days later, and I was driving around pretty gently, and I got a check engine on the dash, just pulled the codes to lean both banks. Running lean is legitimately a problem, so we need to revert the setup a little bit anyways. If it was too rich, well, that would be wasteful of fuel and you could foul up some plugs, but it's not like necessarily dangerous, whereas running lean, you could introduce knock and actually jeopardize the health of the engine. So I will keep the velocity stack in the big filter because we saw positive gains there, and I will take off the MAF, put the OE one back on, and I'll save this nice giant MAF body for the S8 when I do a custom tune later for that. Proof, and this is how it'll stay. Let's call it version 1.5 of the Jackal cold air intake. Okay, moving on to the interior. Admittedly, a place that I've been neglecting because since the very first day I bought this car, I've been sitting on a small pile of parts to fix up a couple of things, but some background on the S4s that I actually purchased it originally from an Audi tech who works at one of the dealerships in Calgary, or as they like to call themselves, Calgary. And it means that I was able to take advantage of his staff discount to do some really important things like, for example, replacing the front windshield with factory glass, but also get my hands on some parts. And one of these things are no longer available, true unobtainium. Let's go take a look at it. I should start off by saying it's kind of unfortunate the B7 platform has problems with cracking dash trim, whether it's carbon fiber or not. And mine is no different. Since the very first day I got this car, what always kind of bothered me was this giant Y-shaped crack. It's actually worse than it appears on camera right now. And I have another hairline one right there in the middle. You may not be able to see it. And it just sort of sullies the overall interior look. However, the added complexity about the 25 Quattro is that this is not the normal S4 carbon fiber. It's the thick weave RS4 one. You know, this one. As I'm sure you've already guessed, sitting in the back of my extra little part drawer here, I have the forbidden fruit. Ah, yes. Yes, sir. The true genuine article from Audi. And candidly, I think it says a lot that I'm even willing to install this on the car, because I think we both know that individually, this is probably worth about $400 or $500 US at this point. That's what I think I could get for it. And there's no real reason why I have to install this on the car. What it shows, I'd like to think anyways, is that I want this car to live on for a long, long time under another loving owner that's going to drive it all the time. I really hope this thing is cherished. This part is certainly not meant to be a DIY, but for the record, it is pretty easy to get at that trim. Kind of got to take off a few pieces beforehand though, like this lower panel section below the steering wheel. There's really just 3 8mm bolts that come out of there on the bottom, and one more on the side where you access the fuse panel. After that, with some very careful prying from your non-marring tools, you got to take off this center trim piece. It doesn't actually get held in by anything other than clips themselves, so you just kind of like pull it straight out, at which point the trim fasteners are exposed. More 8mm bolts, 1, 2, 3, and then one on the other side. You got to pop off that side panel by the glove box as well. Of course, there's always extra steps though. On the old piece of trim, this is a different part number, just this little triangle right here. It covers up the edge so it's not exposed when you open the passenger door, so I just have to move this piece over. Before I put in that trim, just to make sure that I don't damage it at all, I have one more little side project to do while I'm in there. This whole episode is while I'm in there. I have the very classic sticky glove box door. I'm sure like half of you watching this video already have some version of this problem, depending on what phase you're in. I'm lucky, it's early. My hinges down here are not cracked, they're in good condition. It's just the piston down on the side that moves the glove box door that's getting sticky. So all I really need to do is drop the glove box and do a common little modification on that piston. Again, I'm going to blow right past the DIY portion of this. It's just more 8mm little fasteners that come out on the sides and the bottom and the top. You know the drill. Small side note, it's actually been kind of nice. In the last year or so, I would say that I finally hit a critical mass where I have basically every tool you might need for an average type of project on a European car. And this little kit of keys for removing radios that are usually stuck inside of dashes or glove boxes is certainly one of those things. It used to be where I'd have to jump on Amazon and quickly buy something and cost me a day. No, not anymore. It's the evening now, so forgive the terrible lighting. But like I said, I'm a lucky guy here. My hinge itself is in perfect condition. And really the remedy to this is taking a small drill bit, putting a hole in the back of the piston, putting some sort of lubricant in there, and then working the piston until it's free again. And as much as I'd kind of like to do that without removing anything else here, I want to get the piston off of this. The door is sort of sticky as is, and I don't want to open and close this thing as one giant unit. So all you really need to do is go down here. There's a little pin, and it's kind of like a little compression fork on the other side. So on the back side, squeeze those fingers together, then you'll take some needle nose pliers or whatever you can grip onto the tiny little edge of that pin, and then just yank it out. I think you already have a pretty good idea of the problem, but just as a demonstration, it takes a lot of pressure. I'd say I'm lifting with, 5, 6, 7 pounds of pressure just to get this to retract. I'll come in and give myself a little access hole with my 1/8 inch drill bit. And that's all the size you need to come in with a normal size of tube for a spray can. And I'll put in a little portion of good old-fashioned George W. And now I'll go ahead and just work the piston. Whoa, my God! Shot to the roof. Work the piston is what I was going to say. What's nice about having this hole now is that it points up, and just popping off that side panel near the passenger door means that at any point in time a future owner can just twist the end of a tube in there, give it a little shot, keep it loose. Now that everything's rigged up again, observe as we open the glove box, it'll just fall open so natural, so nice, and without any pressure or stiffness, right back together. Before all the glove box and trim and all that stuff I've taken out goes back in, I'm going to take an opportunity just to do some carpet cleaning. I'm talking about with a Bissell, spray it down, vacuum out all the crud that's sitting in the carpet that you can't readily see, but is there. And I'll meet you back for the next little modification in here. But just in case you're watching this video and you go, what are these wires? I don't have that in my car. It's true, you probably don't, because I have an Android unit. This is the Denzian, if that's how you might say that. You can Google it. These are kind of cool little plug-and-play modules that you can buy. The other half of it is down on the other side. Essentially what it does is gives you some Bluetooth access to play stuff off of your phone, and you control it from the head unit still, but you just need a little bit of hardware and wiring plugged in behind the dash. I have to show you this actually. In that last scene, you would have already seen that the carpets looked really clean, but once you get in there, it's still always pretty dirty. All in all, it took me about 5 hours yesterday to shampoo all the carpets of the entire car. It's dried overnight, and now theoretically it's time to put back in the mats. But what's always bothered me is that even though we have these nice S4 door sills, you get A4 floor mats in your S4 by default. Whereas the sports mats that are no longer available anymore were a much nicer upgrade and not that expensive, although these days they're not necessarily hard to find, but it'll still run you somewhere between $150 and $250 to get a set of these. Other than to preserve your ego, they are a little different for anyone that really cares. Just the lines reverse direction on both the front and the back, opposed to the OE A4 ones, which just go up and down. Yeah, they look a little cooler. I like it. It's all about the little touches. Just the rhomboid, I think Audi calls it, on the door sill, and then the mat, and then a little pop of red from the JHM Delrin shifter, a little bit on the steering wheel. It all kind of comes together in the end, you know? I've been editing this video, and I can tell with all the stuff that you haven't seen yet, it's about an hour long. And if we're being honest, that's too long for a YouTube video, especially because I watch my channel analytics very carefully. And I know that on any given video, after you kind of jump around and watch things, you'll watch about 4 minutes of it total, which is a little depressing. So is the fact that only 10% of you on average are subscribed to the channel. So maybe you could help me out there too. So what I'm going to do is actually just cut it right here. There's much more to come, but I'm going to give you a whole second part next Saturday, April the 26th. And lastly, don't be afraid to check out the join button and what the Four Rings Club is all about. I'll tell you right now, the members who are in that group have already known what the new project car is for like 2 months now. Thanks everyone. See you in 1 week for the wrap up of this pre-sale series.